right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get ready and begin chapter 3. We'll talk about enhanced instruction right now. So, what do we do about instructional planning? You and I just don't go into a classroom and start to teach and just wing it. There's got to be some planning, there's got to be some preparation before we walk in there and get started. You and I need to determine what needs to occur in the classroom and during lessons. Many times what you and I'll have is a course scope and sequence or a curriculum that has already been created for us, either by the institution or else by some agency that has a curriculum that we need to follow, like NCCR, something like that. So we've got curriculums out there. We just need to know what is needed to be taught, and then what kind of activities need to take place in that classroom during those lessons to be able to get the maximum amount of teaching and learning taking place. Now, having a set of focused questions provides a framework and a systematic process to create effective instruction. Asking those questions: what do I need to teach? When do I need to teach it? Addressing those issues will certainly provide us a framework to know exactly how much needs to be taught, when it needs to be taught, and then give us, once that's nailed down, what type of process do we need to follow, from basic instruction, building on each bit of knowledge and skill that our students learn and acquire, and then building up to them to the point where they are graduating with the skills and the knowledge that they need to go to work and be productive employees. It takes a lot of work to do that. And planning ensures the best possible approach to learning. One of the wonderful things about many institutions is that they'll have a curriculum committee where you'll get more than one bit of insight. Most trade programs will have advisory committees where people from industry will look at the curriculum and say, yes, this is good. Yes, this is good, but yet you need to be able to teach this information, and no, this information is outdated. We don't do that anymore. And so curriculum development is an ongoing process. It never ends. Our curriculum is never finished because, let's face it, changes take place all the time. And so we need to be able to adapt and to make provision for those changes. And that kind of planning up front helps us to accomplish that. As we continue with our instructional planning system, effective instruction is planned by skillful and creative educators. One of the wonderful things, having taught as long as I have, is to meet some of the most brilliant, creative, skillful, dedicated instructors on this planet. I will put our faculty against anybody, anywhere, any place. And especially during the last 5 to 10 years, where we've seen budget cuts basically erode our financial base for many of our technical programs. is just amazing to see how much these instructors can accomplish with very little funds and still produce at a very, very high level. Let's face it, we are really blessed here in Louisiana with those kinds of people. Now, what is a systems approach? In general, in research and in the literature, a systems approach is usually a systematic, very formal, step-by-step process. You got to really do some planning on the front end, and then once you've planned, you execute that plan step by step, and then you design, create, evaluate, and revise. That is the process. The design phase allows you to be able to kind of build the environment that you're looking for, and then creating lessons, creating work projects that the students are going to be doing. Live work is another term that we've used over the years to be able to build that skill. Then having some system to evaluate. Is this passing or is this failing? And then once you've got that in there, always looking at the whole process to see what can I do better? What works, what doesn't work? And then implementing those revisions and basically going back through the whole process over and over again. Now, your book talks about the Design, Plan, Act, or DPA system. It's a three-step system that addresses all the needed planning steps. You design what it is you need to design, you plan it out, this is how it's going to work, and then you act upon it. And here is a graphic that illustrates that. The design phase is where you create like a lesson or a unit of instruction. And then you set out and plan those lessons every day. This is what will take place. Another term we use are lesson plans. And then write your action plan. This is what we're going to do on day 1 and implement those things. And this is what we'll do on day 2 and implement those things in the lesson plan. Very simple 3-step process. Now, during the design phase, you and I look comprehensively and strategically at the targeted curriculum. If we're doing auto mechanics, we look at the whole curriculum. What does the student need to know? Engine rebuilding, brakes, electronics, drivetrain, you name it. Anything from the front end to the back end of a car. You got to look at it as a comprehensive package. And then strategically, what are those very, very important bits of information or areas that need to be taught, like safety? Safety needs to be front and center of every lesson that we do. And so strategically, safety is going to be at the core of just about every lesson that's taught. Others may not be as important strategically, but yet still need to be taught maybe in a sequence, because one bit of information builds on the next, builds on the next, builds on the next. Now, one way we can do that is an instructional design template helps ensure that no step is missed. One type of design template is the Dynamic Instructional Design, or DID model, which will help us in creating the instructional design. Now, In that, we can move on to the plan phase. We can look at the essential components of the daily lesson plans. There are some components of a lesson plan that need to be consistent every day. One thing that needs to be looked at every day is what was taught the day before. We need to basically review with the students because let's face it, our memories aren't perfect. And so doing some review is always a great thing to include in a lesson plan. And then you target your specific daily objectives. What is it that during that class period that you're going to want your students to learn? Now, lesson planning goes just beyond setting a set of objectives. Like, for example, let's say you're in machine shop and you're on a lesson for the student to be able to read a micrometer. Well, your objective is to teach them how to read a micrometer to a desired accuracy. And so, if that's the case, chances are you're going to want to provide them maybe with some components that you have that they can go out there and take a micrometer and measure actual pieces from the shop. To do that, you have to prepare the classroom. You've got to have your classroom ready. You've got to have the materials on hand. You have to have the micrometers there, enough to go around for whoever's going to be doing the lesson. And then detail the steps in the pedagogical cycle. Are you going to be doing a demonstration? Are you going to be doing a lecture? That gets down to how you're going to teach. Then identify technologies and materials. Obviously, if you're going to be teaching micrometers, you got to have some micrometers. And you have to have some models. But do you have like a video of how to use a micrometer? Do you have maybe CDs that have animations of how to read them? You've got that. Then certainly you've got some technology to be able to make that happen. And then check for success. Are you going to give some kind of test? Or are you going to give a paper and pencil test? Or are you going to do a skills test where you'll just have them measure 10 pieces and then write down the measurements? Something like that. But we got to have an evaluation component in our lesson planning. And then the act phase. Review your lesson plan. Not a bad thing just before you get ready to teach. If you have some time, just go over the lesson plan to kind of give you some confidence whenever you get ready to go and deliver it. From experience, there's been some days I've just walked into a classroom and started teaching. Those days, more often than not, turn out to be disasters. I get sidetracked on some things. I forget some things that need to be taught. If I have that lesson plan or outline in front of me, like that, I can check them off. And then like that, I don't miss anything. Because you don't want to go back and reteach if you can help it. The instructional action plan, or IAP, is your lesson plan to-do list. And that IAP will detail everything to be done as a series of steps. So you lay out from step 1 to however many steps you need. This is what has to take place. Now, one thing, especially for like a vocational type of environment, that IAP makes a wonderful handout for your students. for them to go out there and do what you've asked them to do, if it's to read a micrometer, because that gives them a step-by-step sequence of what they need to do in order to be successful in reading a micrometer. And just doing a little cutting and pasting or copying and pasting off your word processor can make you some wonderful handouts very, very quickly, because you've got it all detailed in your lesson plan. Once you've got that done, then you're ready to deliver the goods and implement your lesson. Now, we mentioned the DID model, so let's talk a little bit about it. And that was developed by Gagne. We read about him in chapter 2. But it's a comprehensive model of instructional design. It takes us from beginning to end. And it focuses on dynamic design, supporting continuous adjustment and change. So you can design your unit of instruction, but yet it gives you the flexibility of going in and changing and implementing, updating on a continual basis. The DID model is built around continuous internal and external feedback loops. Now, continuous improvement is core of high quality instruction. We always want to try to do things better. That's one of the things I think that is really in the heart and core of a vocational educator. We're always looking for a better way to do things. An easier, more efficient, a simpler way to sometimes break down very, very complicated material so that a student can learn it. But we're always trying to improve it. For those that are very, very happy where they are and don't want to do anything to improve, those instructors are really on a decline. And certainly they're going to have issues when it comes to being evaluated. You and I need to always be improving, no matter how long we've been teaching, no matter how good we think we are. We can always be better, or others think we are. We can always do better. Formative feedback occurs during every step of the learning process. There's always some feedback that you and I can get with this system. And summative feedback is returned at the end of the learning process. So once the student's supposed to have learned what they're supposed to learn, well, then we go back and feedback and try to figure out what worked, what didn't work. And here's the process. Now, notice how this side takes us through the design phase. First of all, we've got to know our students. Then know exactly what our objective is. State it. Get it done. Then we get our learning environment established. Get our classroom ready. Then we find out what's the best way to teach this thing. Is it hands-on? Is it lecture? Is it a demonstration, combination? We just have to figure it out. Then we find and select some technologies to help us implement that. Whether we have videos, whether we have computer software, whether we have any kind of technological piece of equipment that's at our disposal, we utilize it. Then we look at and evaluate the lesson. Did it work? Did it not? And then once we make that determination, we go back and revise. Start from the beginning and start the loop again. We just constantly go back over every lesson and see what we could do better. What can we do? And I'll just go over each one of these steps real quick. Know the learner. Some things to kind of look at. What are their physical cognitive development stage or stages? Or there'll be some age groups that we'll be doing work with that's inappropriate for other age groups. We just got to know our students. Cultural and language differences. Those things can impact us. Certainly if we have a bunch of students that are ESL students, we're going to have somebody there to interpret what it is we're talking about. Also, some of the terminology that we might use in using the English language may not translate exactly to that person's native language. Had a young lady that I had the privilege to teach from Russia. She would come to me every now and then, since I taught her one developmental reading class. And obviously, because Russian was her native language, she had some issues with translation. And so once she got into the LPN program, she'd come by from time to time and ask me, Dr. Levere, what is the definition of this word? And then I had myself some thesauruses and some other reference material at my disposal. And finally got on the internet to a Russian English website where you could type in the word and get the definition. And so we found that, and after we found that, she didn't really need to come back anymore, because she was able to get that translation right. Sometimes we just take that for granted, and we certainly don't want to do that. The incoming skills and current knowledge base. What do your students know right now, walking in the door? Is it nothing? Sometimes that's the best way to go. You can start and teach them exactly what they need to know as you move forward. If they come in with some prior knowledge, sometimes that's a difficult thing, because what they might have learned might have been wrong. Somebody might have taught them the wrong thing, and it's much more difficult to break that kind of situation and then teach them what's right. And let's face it, our jobs are already hard to begin with. What are their individual characteristics, like learning, cognitive styles, intelligence, etc.? One of the things that you could do is just let them take what is called the VARC test. It's free. You can it's a great first day of class activity. You give them the website, they go in and take the VARC. It's about 60 questions. And what it does, it gives you a very good insight into their learning styles. Of course, you need a computer lab to be able to do it, but sometimes that might be available to you, or else you can kind of maybe do it in shifts in your classroom. But usually the first few days of class are chaotic to begin with, and that would be a good thing to do, instead of having them just sit down and do paperwork. How can you kind of group similarities and differences? Obviously, every student's different, but yet you can sometimes get some students that you can group together that are maybe visual learners, and then pour out a bunch of visual type of learning exercises for them. Find your auditory learners, put them in a place where they can kind of listen to instructions and to whatever you have. And then, of course, those that have to work with their hands, put them in the lab where they can do that kind of thing. Now, the question is asking, how will the above affect the design? Let's face it. If you don't know those, or don't know the answers to those questions, then how can you do any kind of designing? How can you do any kind of modifications? All you're doing is going out there presenting a lesson and hoping for the best, that they're going to get it. Well, if you do that, chances are some will be able to understand what it is you're trying to get across to them, but yet some will be totally lost. You've got to know, we have to know our students. Now, here's one of the, I don't know what to say about them other than the most used, abused, and misunderstood things in education, at least to me. Performance objectives. What I like about this slide is that it really cuts through all of the mumbo jumbo about objectives and basically looks at the three major things that occur in an objective. First, you and I got to state exactly what it is the learner is going to be able to do after we teach them. And it's got to be action. It's not understand. It's not comprehend or something like that. It's doing words, measure, cut, place, all kinds of action words, saw. I guess I might have said measure. But those are the things. Type. I hope you kind of getting the picture here. What are you asking them to do? Then focus your objectives on the skills and competencies of the students. We need to kind of tailor our objectives to the level that our students are at. Let's face it. Your first lesson on micrometers, you might be lucky if your students get an opportunity to kind of measure to the nearest 10th or 100th of an inch or millimeter. More advanced students ought to be able to take it to the thousandth or 10,000ths. You know, they aren't born with those kinds of skills and knowledge. It takes time to be able to use a micrometer and integrate that usage over a period of time so that they can become more skilled and more confident in its use. And then you can kind of build that accuracy with that experience. But we've got to know where they are. And our objectives should be as clear, reasonable, and measurable. They know that you and I need to write them so that you know and the students know what they're going to do. And we don't need to go into this big, long discussion about a whole lot of things. They need to learn one thing only per lesson plan. That's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Now you might say, well, Doc, that's going to be 100 lesson plans. Well, if that's what it takes, get yourself a big binder to hold them all in there. Doesn't mean you can't teach 2 lessons in one class period, but a lesson plan should be focused on one specific lesson or one specific objective that you want to get done. And that's it. And it's got to be measurable. You've got to be able to have some kind of measure to grade it. Not say it's going to be passing. Well, what constitutes for passing? Well, if it's a micrometer measuring to the nearest 100th of an inch. Or getting back to an old drafting example, students are going to draw a drawing to the nearest 32nd of an inch. And don't think that I didn't have to go put a ruler on those drawings and measure them. I did that more times than I can count. But but they could see very, very clearly if that drawing was not exactly right. And if it wasn't, they did it again until they got it right. But we've got to be able to measure it. We've got to have some standard of measuring. Certainly, like on a safety test, you want 90% or 100% accuracy. Students have to get all the answers right before they can take move on and use the tool. And so you've set your standard. The student's got to go meet it. Now, our performance objectives ought to have 4 components. The STEM, the target performance that we're looking for, how we're going to assess them, and then what's the criteria for success. For example, the student will be able to identify the subject and verb in a sentence written on the board with 95% accuracy. So, what's going on here? Well, evidently we must be having an English lesson because we're talking about subjects and verbs. All right? That's our STEM. Target performance. What are we looking for? Well, we want them to be able to identify subjects and verbs. We want them to perform that, looking at a sentence written on the board. They ought to be able to find that subject and verb. That's what we're hoping for. The assessment method. Well, in order to identify it, obviously we could probably do a couple of things. Have the students write on a sheet of paper that says subject and verb. Write the word that's the subject. Write the word that's the verb on that sentence on the board. Or else they could tell it to us. Johnny, Susie, what's the subject of the sentence? What's the verb of the sentence? Did you get it right, wrong? We can get some immediate feedback there. And then the criteria for success, 95% accuracy. So 95 times out of 100, they're going to get it right. Or a little over, or you can say 9 times out of 10, they would get it right. That is what's going to be the determining factor of whether they know it or they don't, is by that percent accuracy. Now, one of the things about we ought to do for objectives is to consider Bloom's taxonomy when we write objectives. Now, Bloom came up with a whole listing and level of cognitive ability. And here's what he came up with. Knowledge, being able to recall facts. Comprehension, being able to interpret facts. You know, we can go ahead and come up with all kinds of trivia or remember stuff, I guess, like on Jeopardy or whatever. But what do those facts mean? That gets to comprehension. Application, applying information to new situations. So if I learn something here, how do I apply it? Maybe in some other situation. Analysis, recognizing components within data. Maybe being able to draw some conclusions from that data. Synthesis, creating new ideas for the data provided. Maybe we can come up with something brand new from what we have. Maybe come up with a new way of doing things. And let's face it, we have all kinds of processes in vocational education. People are coming up with new ways and new technologies to be able to do some things. Getting back to machining, who would have thought we would be able to cut metal with water? We've used metal cutting machines for centuries, but now something brand new has come out where we can pump water at like almost 100,000 pounds per square inch through a little old needle size orifice and cut 1 or 2 inch steel and not affect the metal. It doesn't generate any heat. It's an amazing process. Who thought we'd be welding metal with laser beams? People came up with new ideas of how to do that once the technologies became available. And then finally, evaluation, making thoughtful value judgments based on the performance. Now, this is a really good graphic to be able to kind of give you some idea of how to write your objectives. Now, notice how we go from knowledge, which is kind of like the foundation of our pyramid, and each step involves a little higher cognitive process. But look at the action verbs that are at each one. Identify, describe, define, state, label, things like that. Under analysis, analyze, examine, contrast, infer, subdivide. For evaluation, assess, weigh, critique, consider, judge, recommend. These are all action words that a student is going to need to do in order to fulfill the objectives that we've got. For step 3, establish the learning environment. We adjust the physical space to support learners. We may have to modify our labs to a certain extent, but we do what is necessary to get it done. Provide a positive, nurturing environment. You and I are the ones that set that situation. How you and I come into the class, our state of mind when we come in is really going to determine what kind of day we're going to have. Because I can guarantee you that students are going to pick up on our moods, our psyche that day, and pretty much model it. So if you and I are going to have are having a bad day whenever we go show up to work, guess what? It's going to rub off on our kids and our students. So we want to keep it positive. And we want to keep our learners active and engaged. We don't want idle students. Idle students are a danger because they can get into stuff that they don't need to be getting into. We want to keep them engaged. We want to keep them focused and learning and active. And in order to do that, we've got to prepare some well-organized and articulated lesson plans. We've got to be crystal clear what we expect to take place every lesson that we teach. Now, this will also include all the conditions affecting learners that are physical and non-physical, like the physical space of the room. Do we have 30 students crammed into a classroom that ought to take 15? Not a lot of learning is going to take place like that. What's the climate? Is the room too hot, too cold for students? And I've already mentioned the attitude that you and I bring to that class. Dunn & Dunn's research says that different aspects of physical space affect different learning styles. And sometimes some very simple changes can enhance the learning environment. I guess I have to confess this. I never was too much on I guess having posters and bulletin boards in my classroom. And one time I got gigged on my evaluation because my room was very bland. So I went out and got some really free materials from a lot of vendors and salespeople to put up in the classroom. Some of them were motivational posters. Obviously, they had the name of that product there, but hey, they were free. And some of them, and we used some of those machines there in the classroom. Starrett, which is a company that makes micrometers, and you can kind of see why I'm on the machine shop example right now. You can go to their website and request instructional materials, and they'll send you tons of free materials. When I taught drafting, they would send these little credit card size decimal equivalent tables and tap drill sizes. Some were the size of credit cards. Some were about like a 3x5 plastic. Students could take those and tape them to their desks. And they'd send them like 100 to a pack of those things. And we just give them out to everybody. Wonderful resources. Very simple changes. And they sent me a whole bunch of motivational posters and also posters dealing with tap drill sizes, decimal equivalent sizes, and things like that I could put around the room. And then next go around, my administrators were, wow, look at all of this that you got. Man, you must have busted your budget. I said, no, it was free. So if you and I want to, search, we can do some things like that. And you'll be surprised just how it's going to change the climate in that classroom. Then step 4, identify teaching and learning strategies. Teaching strategies are the methods that you're going to use to help your students obtain those learning objectives. Now, your learning strategies are the techniques and activities you require for your students to master their content. So teaching strategies deal with you and me. What are you and I going to do to present the information? Are we going to need to teach? Is a student going to need to read? That can vary. But then the learning strategies is basically what the student is going to do. Are they going to have to do some online lessons? Are they going to have to go into the lab and build some things, or else weld some things together, or run some beads? What are you going to make them do? And combined, they are referred to as the pedagogy or pedagogical cycle. That's the activities that take place for learning. And the two fundamental processes that take place in a classroom are teaching and learning. Those two things don't happen, we got nothing. And there's a pedagogical cycle starting here at the top. You have yourself a little pre-organizer, kind of get yourself ready. Use some motivators right at the beginning of the lesson to kind of get them fired up on the lesson and kind of see how it applies to them. You build your bridges to prior knowledge, kind of do some reviewing, see how this fits into what they were going to learn today. Share the objectives with them. Say, this is what you're going to do. This is my objective for today. Then you sit down and you teach, or stand up and teach the new knowledge. Then you do some reinforcing by going into the lab, or else providing activities to help reinforce what they've learned. And try to give them some practical experiences. Certainly in vocational education, we really know how to do this one well, because many times the students are using the software or hardware that they're going to use on the job. And then finally, a culminating review. You go back and review, this is what we learned today, and that will certainly provide you an evaluation of whether or not you were successful in your lesson. And here there are those parts of the cycle that we've just looked at right there in this particular slide. Don't see anything there that is really anything that I think that I've missed, and so we're going to just move on. Now, what does that have to do with instructional technology, since this is what the course is all about? Well, we don't want to dazzle them with all kinds of technology. We want to use that technology in a real and meaningful way to make our students learn and make the lessons real to them. And so your methods are the strategies you're going to use to achieve a lesson. The media is going to be all the technology that you're going to use. Audio, visual, video, digital, whatever it is. Now, the methods are going to be teacher-centered or student-centered. Are we going to do a presentation, a lecture, demonstration, class discussion, or any of the other types of teacher-centered strategies? Well, we got to decide what it's going to be. And then decide what kind of student-centered strategies are going to take place. Are they going to do an oral report, learning together in groups, simulations, role-playing games, or else they're going to go in the lab and build some things for us, do a research project, whatever it is. That's the activities that you and I are going to use to reinforce the lesson. But then, what kind of media is going to be used with that? Non-projected visuals could be handouts. Projected visuals, we can throw it up on a screen with a PowerPoint or else some graphic there. Audio, video, digital. We've got all kinds of possibilities available to us now. And then identify and select your support technologies. What are the tools that you're going to use to support your teaching and learning strategies? What technology are you going to utilize? Then once the strategies have been mapped out, the tools to build those experiences should be evident. Once we know what we want to do, what are the tools at our disposal to get that done? And then identify the technology that will do it. Getting back to drafting, if I'm going to be teaching AutoCAD, I need computers. I need the AutoCAD software. I need a good AutoCAD reference manual. If I have some AutoCAD learning videos, I'd throw that in too. So we've got to have some technology for many of our vocational programs. And then select those that are available to you. Look, if I don't have a overhead projector or a in focus or a LED projector, and all I have is a overhead projector, that's all I've got. Then I have to adapt to the technology that I have. And also I've got to be competent in how to use them. Because the last thing you and I want to do is to go out there and be fumbling around with all this technology and taking up class time. Because you and I just don't want to look like we don't know what we're doing. That was never more evident to me than this semester. I've been moved a couple of times to classrooms teaching my remedial math classes, and I'm now in our main auditorium teaching a class to about 20, 30 students. Well, they have this podium on there that I've watched many people stand behind and use, and I'm not one to be standing behind a podium. So I had to kind of sneak in there one day before school and play with this thing, because I knew I didn't have the time, and I certainly didn't want to do it in front of my students. So I got one of the security people to unlock the place, and I was able to kind of get in and play with this thing and kind of get the feel for what I needed to do to be able to get the projector on, how to access my account. I had to do those things up front before class so I could be competent with that technology. And here's some little graphic with a number of different types of audio, visual, and digital types of materials that are out there available to us. And look, let me just kind of go back to this. I don't know if you and watch the cursor. Don't ever minimize the board and the chalkboard. Yeah, now I've got the whiteboard with all the markers, but I still got a chalkboard in my classroom, and you know what? I still use it. It still gets the job done. I've been blessed with a whole lot of technology, but you know what? I still go back and use that blackboard every now and then, so it's still relevant. And then step 6, a summative evaluation and revision plan. So how do we know whether or not we did the job, and how do we revise our teaching methods? Well, your formative feedback continues throughout all the steps of the DID model. We're always going to receive feedback from the students at every phase of the DID model. And then the summative feedback is where we do it on the back end. Once the lesson is over, we're finished, then we go back and see, did the students, we give our chapter test or our unit test or lesson test, and see if the student passed at the level that we've set. And if they do, we've been successful. If they don't, then maybe we need to go back and look and reevaluate our process. And then a final evaluation revision ensure continuous improvement of design. We always want to go back and look at our lessons, every one of them, to see if there's something we can do better. Never, never, never be satisfied with the status quo. Now, we have what is called the plan phase. The DID model provides the instructional big picture and blueprint for the teaching learning process. So we kind of start from the beginning of the lesson as we deliver it till it's done. But once the design is completed, you can plan your daily lessons. And your lessons will provide a day-to-day snapshots of what's going to happen. You know, once you do one lesson today, you're going to have a lesson for tomorrow. You know what to expect. The students know what to expect because you've told them in that lesson plan, this is what's going to happen. During the ACT phase, our instructional action plan includes what are the learner participation activities or preparation activities. What do we need to do to get our students ready for our lab work? Get that classroom ready or that lab ready for them. You list your teaching and learning activities. What are you going to be doing as the teacher? Tell and be very clear. This is what I need to do. And then what are the learners going to do in that lab to reinforce what you're teaching? Create your personal prompts. You know, one thing that you can do is just to write down some questions to ask some students and some prompts to kind of give you some information that you might need to kind of add as you deliver that lesson. One of the wonderful things I like about PowerPoint is that you can put notes there. If there's some things that you really like to focus on, write down some notes. Whenever if you sit or stand behind a computer screen, when you're in that mode of delivery, the students only see the PowerPoint, but yet you see the PowerPoint slide and then the notes that you have underneath it. It's like having your own digital lesson plan, which makes it real easy for you to keep on track, because let's face it, every time you deliver a lesson, there's opportunities for you and I to get sidetracked. This helps you stay on track. Identify your support technologies. What are you going to be using to deliver that lesson? And list your feedback tools. Are you having some kind of test at the end, or worksheet that they're going to do, some homework? And then detail some follow-up activities. Are you going to have some other things like homework, or like a unit test later on to give them? Now, we need to remember that technology in and of itself is a tool that may support your design and plans. It's not the plan. We use it as a tool, just like any other tool in a shop. It helps us get the job done. Enhanced teaching and learning must be well thought out. You and I need to really be cognizant of what it is we want to accomplish in that classroom during a lesson. And it also should help us to do something new or do it better. Let's face it. I guess I'll pick on my nurses. These mimeographed anatomy sheets that they used to give out. Let's face it. They were good with all the identifications of the, with the arrows pointing to whatever part of the body that they were talking about. Well, look, that doesn't do any justice compared to some of the online websites that you can go to that have the interactive visual things right there, where you can kind of manipulate. I saw one where it's like it's 3D, where you can turn the person inside out, and rotate them up, down, beneath, so you can get all the, see all the sides of a heart or the liver in its relationship to all the other organs. It's just amazing. I think there was one called Adam that could do that. And let's face it, you and I may have a lot of options available to us. You and I need to choose those technologies wisely. And so that will wrap up our lesson for today. It was kind of long, but yet there's a whole lot of stuff out there for us. So this will end our lecture on chapter 3, and we will begin chapter 4 very shortly.